they've been promised other properties once they get themselves up and going as a charity. They have gotten promises of quite a bit of funding and, other promises that look like they may develop very nicely. So they're in the process of, they have a working group together that are doing kind of the policy making or the procedures or whatever for the home that they want to start. Their concern is, they've worked a lot with women in street-based prostitution, but they haven't worked directly with women who've been trafficked and who are trying to escape from trafficking. So their concern is how to avoid some of the pitfalls that others might have experienced when they started this work, so that they don't fall into all the same problems that everybody else did. Now, some things I think are unavoidable. So they were asking me if I had any contact with women with groups that have set up safe houses. And I don't, that I know of, but I know of a couple of people that can give me some contacts. So I'm in the process of trying to track down some contacts for them. But yesterday, as Rita knows, when I was at Ruhama, I asked them, had they ever thought of doing a safe house in Ireland? And the answer was yes, they had thought of it, but they had thought better of it. And they didn't think it was a very appropriate place to do it. And I'm just quoting what she said, okay? Or summarizing what Tricia said, was that they felt like in Ireland, everybody is so aware of what everybody else is doing. And there would be no way to keep the neighborhood from really knowing what was there and who was there. And so in a sense, it would no longer be able to be a safe house. She didn't say people were nosy, but she was more polite than that. But, and so she just felt like that it would be very difficult to have a safe house in Ireland. That's as much as I can tell you about it at this point.
Catherine, do you remember you told me the story she told about her repatriation last week?
The girl who'd been trafficked into Ireland and from Brazil, and she had made contact with Ruhama, and they were having her repatriated and back to Brazil. But while she was waiting, she was absolutely terrified. What could happen to her. And the safest place they could find was in the house of one of our Brigidine Community Sisters in Dublin. And they kept her there in safety for a few days while she was waiting. And it was an extraordinary story she told. The person who had the most influence on her and who reached out for her was an 85-year-old sister. And in some way, there was tremendous healing for her in that encounter, that she was able to hug everybody before she left for Brazil.
Because oftentimes when they're trafficked or sexually exploited, they can't deal with touch. But apparently when the young woman first came into this home, the 85-year-old sister just gave her a big, huge, unconditional, loving hug. And as Rita said, that was just the healing thing for that woman, that at that moment then she could feel safe. And as a result, was able to hug everybody else before she left. And so thank you for bringing that back to me, because it's a very poignant story for the trafficking. Yes, they have.
My sisters are working quite near where that lady had left her 2 children and her mother in Brazil. So we were contacted about support for her when she gets back. So we were able to put in touch with the support centre, where the parish is a bit distant from our home, where they look after women who suffer violence. So we're hoping that at the other end there will also be a network through religious to support her.
An example of the network at play, right? It's really critical. You asked about the map of the east coast of Africa. I would say that's, we know that there are problems, many places in the world where we are not. It just happens to be where our members are, and that was all that the map was showing, is where our members are. So if another congregation would happen to join us that is in places where we're not represented now, we'd be most happy. So that's
Mr.
that.
Conlon was going to say something, I think.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry.
Just saying that the shepherds have years and years at receiving people who have been abused in home, are afraid to stay at home, on account.
Good shepherds have been involved in this work for years and years, receiving women that have been abused. Yes, and I work very closely with a woman with a sister that's the head of the Good Shepherd NGO in New York. We do a lot of collaboration. Mary Robinson's frustration. Mary Robinson is not alone. She's just experienced it at a higher degree than the rest of us, I think. Mary Robinson's terrific. Every time I hear her speak and see how she strategizes, I'm just, in awe. But it's true. I mean, she, as the head of the Human Rights Commission, certainly was not supported, particularly again by my country, the United States. And I think she has had great difficulty in trying to move the United Nations in any way, even though they keep inviting her back to give talks there. But on the other hand, at this point, the UN is all we've got in terms of international, it's the most international institution and more countries are represented there. So I feel like we need to work with it and try to make it function better. I don't know what else to say about that because I certainly know many of the weaknesses. And I also appreciate, Mary Robinson's frustration, and it's the frustration of many of the NGOs. We just feel like we get our foot in the door and then they find another way to close it off. How easy it is for the governments to sign on to various things and then sort of not do anything about it. And that's certainly the complaint, but I think, again, hopefully, between a combination, if we really have our network set up well between what's going on at the United Nations and what's going on at the national level, and we can continue to pressure the governments to faithfully fulfill their commitments, then over time that can make a difference. But that's a lot of work and it needs constant attention, as you know. That's certainly been the case of the Millennium Development Goals. They're wonderful, they're not perfect, but they at least are in the right areas. But the governments don't do anything about it until there's some kind of need to, make a report or something. I can't give you anything very satisfying about that either, I'm afraid. Percentage of women in the UN, true, small, and not too many women that have risen to the higher levels, either in the Secretariat or the government representation. We had an ambassadors luncheon for women ambassadors the other day, as a part of the Commission on the Status of Women preparation. And how many were there? This was former ambassadors and current ambassadors. And I don't think they were more than 15 or 16 that were there. It's a combination of inequality for women in the countries that appoint the missions and the fact that women don't rise very quickly in the UN system itself, the staff system. And one of the things that we work on, but probably with less attention than some others, is to make the UN faithful to the commitment that they're holding the nations to have at least 30% of persons in public office be women. But the UN doesn't follow its own rules, so we push that a bit too. I don't know how much. I don't know how successfully. Not too. problem with a single issue. You can look at it two ways, I think. It's true that, but I think each single issue is linked very much with other issues in the world, so that if in any way we can move the system on any single issue, I think we're also moving the system for other issues. Although I grant you that sometimes it seems like that's not the case. I think, for example, in Rio in 1992, the environmental conference was sustainable development. Agenda 21 was established, and it looked like there were these wonderful goals out here that the nations were going to work for, and many of them signed up to work on them. And it seems like the next time they have a meeting, they don't necessarily move forward. They try to figure out ways to block moving forward and move backwards. But again, the NGOs keep working on it. We have, and I think if we weren't there, and if we weren't pushing on these international issues, then we would be farther back. So I think besides the positive of step forward, we're blocking moving backwards. And so sometimes it's not a very encouraging place to be. But again, I think it's important that we continue to be there and to continue to stand for those points of justice that we're all really committed to. I'll talk a little bit more about Unanima. I give you the one example with civil society. I think we've made a difference in the CEDAW conventions. We would like to start working in Geneva with the child rights conventions. We have a number of our women worldwide that are doing some things with children and children whose rights are being violated. So when different governments give their reports, we would like to participate in that more. And I'm hoping that in our European membership, we might be able to find one or two women, one or two sisters, one or two associates who would be men too, who would be willing to do some accompaniment of people we might bring from third world countries that don't feel as comfortable in French or in Geneva or as our own women might. So if you take a look at this,